Hi everyone. Today we'll look at where to put a comma in English. It's something that really marks you as a native speaker or a good speaker of English. English people pay a lot of attention to where you put the comma, and even though some German English teachers might tell you it's not important or just leave them out or whatever, don't do that because it's really important to put them in the right place if you don't want to be regarded as someone whose English is not very good. I'm going to run you through 7 basic rules for putting the comma in English, and some of them you'll find are not really difficult because they're very similar to German, such as the first one, the listing comma. Now, when you enumerate things, when you list things, you make an enumeration, such as Tom, comma, Selma, comma, my sister and I went to the store. Then obviously you put commas, and that's the same as in German, so there's nothing really to learn here. You could also do this with phrases and sentences like I saw her, comma, realized she had not seen me, comma, turned around and ran. So basically same as in German. There's one special case here, which we have here. You can put a comma before the and in an enumeration. Yeah. Okay. So you'll need a lot of money, comma, time, comma, intelligence, comma, and patience to get there. And in German, you wouldn't put a comma before the end. In English, you can. It's something called the Oxford comma or final comma. And it's very often used in American English, confusingly, because when you think of Oxford, you might not think of America. But when you speak American English, and when you write American English, rather, make sure you use that comma. In British English, it's not obligatory. You don't have to do it. So you make up your mind. But you know what the Oxford comma is now. It's the comma before and in enumerations. The second case of our 7 cases is also just like in German. So nothing special here. When you address someone, you put a comma. So you say, Dad, comma, you're being horrible. Or, it's cold outside, comma, honey, comma, put on your coat. So this is, again, something that works just as in German. You address someone with a word or a phrase, and then you just put that word or phrase in between commas, or you put a comma after it. Next case, just a little more difficult. Bracketing comma is when you add information. You know what brackets are, in German Klammern. You put something in brackets, you add information to a sentence. For instance, in the sentence David Levithan, comma, an author of teen novels, comma, agrees. Now David Levithan agrees would be fine as a sentence, and you add the information that he is an author of teen novels, and you put that added information in between commas. Similarly here, my uncle, comma, who lives in Nebraska, comma, has voted for Trump. Now you could say my uncle has voted for Trump. That would be, a valid statement. You could understand it. And then you decide, you add a little information, the fact where he lives, who lives in Nebraska. And then you put it in between commas. What we do here is we use what we call a non-defining relative clause. Because this relative clause, who lives in Nebraska, it doesn't define the rest of the sentence. It's not necessary to understand it. It's an extra information. By contrast, look at this sentence. The man you've just talked to has voted for Trump. Now, you've just talked to, we need that part of the sentence, because if we just said the man has voted for Trump, that would be syntactically a correct sentence. But it wouldn't make much sense because you would immediately ask, which man? And then you'd have to have that information, the man you've just talked to. So it's not extra information. It defines the rest of the sentence, which is why we call it a defining relative clause. Okay? Defining relative clause, no commas. Non-defining relative clause, commas. Extra information, commas. Same thing here with a little connective. The house that I mean was sold last year. You want to show the relation to the sentence which came before. So you say, the house that I mean, comma, however, was sold last year. So, sorry, comma, however, comma, was sold last year. Okay, again, we have added information or an added part separated from the rest by using commas. You can do this with the phrase Nora, realizing she could not win the argument, smiled at him. Again, a sentence, but it's extra information. Nora smiled at him would be fine as a sentence, separated through commas. The president, comma, never wanted to miss an opportunity to present himself as being in control, comma, nodded his head. You can see how we can separate a very long sentence inside of the rest of the sentence through the comma. The comma after a transitional phrase. This is not like in German, so you need to pay attention to this. Later, comma, she regretted what she had said. The transitional phrase, later connects she regretted what she had said to what came before. It builds a kind of bridge to what came before. And if you have a transitional phrase like that, you separate it from the rest of the sentence with a comma. However, you still need to pay taxes. As a result, they had lost the next election. Nevertheless, he couldn't stop adoring her. See how it works? All the sentences which you have here, you still need to pay taxes. They had lost the next election. These sentences would work on their own by themselves, but the writer has decided to connect them through a transitional phrase to what came before, and you separate the transitional phrase from the rest. In spite of all this, comma, he still loved her. The comma before an afterthought or a contrasting element, this is quite similar. By this I mean you may add an afterthought, a thought that adds to what you've just said. It was really expensive, comma, far more so than he had thought. Or, it's a great place to spend a holiday, comma, the best on the East Coast. So there's an afterthought. You add something after you've actually finished the sentence. Similarly, you could add a contrasting element. He's the sheriff of this town, comma, not its mayor. Okay? So you say what he's not and add a contrasting element, which is usually started with not. The linking comma. Now this is something you need to pay attention to, and this is where many German students make mistakes. When you link two main clauses, zwei Hauptsätze, two main clauses, you use conjunctions in English, and it's quite easy. Linking conjunctions, you have only 7 of those in English, and they're called for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. They're easy to memorize because they form an acronym, which means you have a word that is formed by the first letters of all of these words together. It's called it's the word fanboys, and it will help you to remember those 7 conjunctions. If you have one of those conjunctions and they link 2 main clauses, you need to put a comma before them. She trusted her sister completely, comma, for she had never lied to her. He helped you out of a fix, comma, and I think that was really nice of him. Yeah, so 2 main clauses, they are linked by a conjunction, and that's why you need a comma in front of it. She doesn't own a car, comma, nor has she ever needed one. Now be careful when you use because, that's not a conjunction. Many German pupils make that mistake. So you don't say she doesn't need a car, comma, because she lives in the city. That wouldn't make sense to an English speaker. Okay, no comma before because when it links to main clauses. Finally, the comma in quotations, and this is something you know because you've read a lot of English texts with quotations, but we don't always pay attention to it. When you add who said something to a quotation, you separate that part from the quotation itself through commas. So you can say, I can't understand why he did this. And when you put she said in front of it, you put a little comma. Similarly, if you put that at the end, I can't understand why he did this, comma, she said. Pay attention to the fact that we have the comma before the quotation marks. In German, it's why he did this, quotation marks, comma, she said. But in English, it's why he did this, comma, quotation marks, she said. And if you put this into the middle of the sentence, it's still the same. you need to separate she said with commas from the quotation. That's all, folks. That's how and where to put commas in English. I hope that was helpful. And as always, feel free to leave a comment and give me your suggestions and send me your questions. See you. Bye.